Okay, hello, we're going to shoot outside again today because I have just about the cleanest 1964 Gibson Scout GA17RVT that I've ever laid eyes on. The customer brought me this and he wants me to do some modifications on it, and well, I kind of talked him into doing the modifications, to be honest. Because it's, you know, these are a bit thin stock, and he agreed. He plays telly mostly, and he would like to be able to use his telly on this, and with the telly they're just so thin it's like ice picks to your ears. So we're gonna take a look at this thing first though, before we get into any modifications, and just admire how clean this is. I mean, we've got a nearly flawless faceplate, and usually these are pretty well ganked up. I mean, by the time they're this age. Okay, there we go. Now we have a little better focus, and you can see just how beautiful this thing is. I mean, every bit of lettering is pretty much all there. All the lines are pretty much all there. Just gorgeous. Covering is in really, really good shape. The only real flaw I saw was right here, right through the Crestline crest. Got a little bit of lost paint. Scout amplifier. For those of you keeping track, or serial numbers are pretty sequential on Gibsons. So that's a 731. So look at how clean this grill cloth is. I mean, you just never see this clean. And this one has the earlier brown style. They moved a little later to like a wheat and then like a silvery sparkle grill cloth. So this is the earlier grill cloth. It has the early Gibson logo with the brown background. So that gives us some indication what time period this is from. We also have the red pointer knobs here instead of the later style, which are the larger round knobs. And we have kind of the tree bark covering. But I mean, just again, let's take a minute to admire how clean this thing is. Let's turn it around and get a look at the back. And the cleanliness just continues on the back. I mean, this thing is, it looks like it just came out of the showroom. Basically like a time capsule. I mean, look at that. The wood, every bit of it. I mean, it doesn't even really have a couple dust bunnies, but I mean, gosh. Probably got more dust bunnies in my sock right now than what's in this thing. There's our original foot switch. We can see the code on the reverb tank is 17th week of 1964, so it's a fairly early 1964 for that component. Our speaker, I never can find the codes on these smaller ones. Sometimes they put them on the top or the bottom, but I think this one's under the sticker, so we won't be able to see a code on that. And I mean, just the inside with the tubes. I mean, look how clean this all is. RCAs. That rectifier is surely a replacement. That's a Bugle Boy. Amperex. Let's see what we got on the codes here. 64. Can't tell which week, but it's early. 17th week. But look how clean. So what we're going to do, again, we're going to do some modifications on this thing. We're going to check and see if it has a tone sucking network. I believe it's probably gonna, and we will remove that. We may fiddle with some of the values of the bypass capacitors. We may check out some other things and see if it needs any further kind of modifications. But first, let's look at a schematic, and then it can kind of help us determine exactly what we want to do. We know we're going to have to replace the 2-prong cord with a 3, because that's still original. I expect to see some changed capacitors, power caps, because he did say it had been recapped on the power caps. but they left the 2-prong when they did that. So we're going to go ahead and probably recap it, or not. I'm sorry, we're not recap it, but we're going to change that power cord rather. So let's get into that and also get the chassis out and see what we've got on the inside.
Before we even open this thing up or do any kind of modifications whatsoever, we're going to get a tone test of how it sounds like with a Gibson guitar, in this case a Gibson SG from 2010, and also a Fender Telecaster, which is what my client wants to be able to play through this amplifier. So let's first listen to it with the SG. It's about halfway up on the loudness. Reverb and tremolo are off. And again, that's about at 5. Probably should tune the guitar. But let's go up to about 8. That's some reverb. So far from a bad sound. I mean, actually, it sounds really great, I would say, with a Gibson guitar. Let's crank it up to 10 and see if we can get it to break up a little bit. Actually, before we do that, let's check out some tremolo. Nice tremolo. We're not going to do anything to touch the tremolo or the reverb on this thing. Actually, the customer did complain that the reverb didn't seem to do very much up until about the 5 point, which, I mean, is fairly common on these. And I would more or less concur with that. It does seem to get a little stronger about at 5. But it's got real good saturation, so I don't think there's any way we can really improve that. And actually, you know, the one thing that might improve it is just having more gain on the input. I'm not sure. We'll have to look at the schematic to see if that is going to affect the reverb or not. It may. Getting a little bit ice picky there, and you can kind of tell it. Telecaster. This is a 52 reissue, and we're going to listen to it starting out about halfway, like the other one. Because anything less than halfway, it's almost like it's not even being amplified that much. I mean, listen to this. I'll turn down to about 2. It's almost nothing there even. You have to get up to 5 before even much amplification even starts to happen with a Telecaster. And what is amplified is not, I mean, I can sit here and talk and you can probably still hear me, you know. Usually the compression on this microphone will cut out any kind of voice at all. But I'm sure you can probably still hear me even though it's at 5. I mean, halfway up on the dial. About all I can say for it right there is that, you know, it is amplifying the sound, and that's about it. It's not inspiring. It's not. There's no balls. There's no nothing. I mean, it's like they really wanted. I think Gibson designers of their amps really just wanted you to be turned off by Fender guitars. They wanted you to plug Fender guitars into their amps and say, no thanks. I'd rather have a Gibson guitar. But you know, we're on 5. Let's crank it up to 8. See if it gets any better. Bright, I'll give it that. Yeah, that's just a little bit too bright in my book. A lot of microphonic ring there. We'll have to figure out what's going on with that. That's definitely a tube, I would say. Or actually it might be this guitar just being that close to the amp. Yeah, that had a lot to do with it. Well, you know, again, even all the way up almost to 10, completely uninspiring, completely thin. I can see why he doesn't like it, and I already pretty much suspected that would be the case just with my experience with other Gibson amplifiers. And much like the Gibson amp over here, there's no tone knob where you can even adjust any of that on this model on the Scout. You don't get a tone knob on your amplifiers until you get to the Discoverer, and I actually have a Discoverer a little further down. You can't see it in the background, but it's kind of the step up from the Scout. But the Scout still only has a loudness control, and that's it. There's no tone control at all. Although you do get reverb and tremolo, no tone, so you can't adjust for those ice picky highs or really do much of anything besides what we're going to do, and that's modify this circuit. So stick around, and we're going to get into that now. Okay, before we really go any further with this thing, let's take a look at a schematic for the GA17RVT Scout. One of the first things I've noticed is that down here in the tube chart, we're showing a 12AX7 in the V1 position, 2 6EU7s, 2 6AQ5s, and a 6CA4 rectifier. This 12AX7 right here is supposed to be the V1 tube. However, if we go over here and look at the actual V1 tube positions, here's the first half of V1, V1A right there. Half of a 6EU7 is what it says on the schematic. V1B, the other half of the 6EU7. So over here, whoever charted this out made a mistake. Either it's supposed to be a 6EU7 or it's not. We'll have to check that out and see just a moment which one it is. As far as everything else, as we suspected, there is a tone sucking network, and it is right here. Very familiar for those of you who have seen some of my other videos, and you were probably, some of you I'm sure were already aware of these anyway. But we'll take a look and see if it's a single component or if it's all built out. They did do it two different ways, and I've seen both ways.
This is a very small capacitor right before this network, so we may experiment with changing this capacitor to something more like a .02 perhaps, or a .05 maybe even, and that's actually gonna move the bass frequency cutoff more toward the bass, so it's going to allow more bass through. Removing this certainly will allow more bass through. We're going directly into the leg of a volume pot after that, so we won't need any kind of and then there's a 470 grid stopper beyond there, so we won't need any kind of grid stopper because we're going into that. Looking a little further, let's see, over here we do have a bypass cap of 20 microfarads on this first stage, so we're probably okay with that. 68K is a pretty good value. So all this looks pretty standard, and this looks okay. This cap we're going to experiment with probably again. We'll remove this coming through. 500 is good for that value. We won't bother with that. 470 is a bit large for grid stopper. If things act as if they're a little, I don't know, like a little dead sounding, uninspiring, we may experiment with something a little bit lower, maybe like 100K or 68K, somewhere in that kind of region, 150K, you know, something a little less maybe than a 470, but for now it can stay. Until we can check things out. This 0.1 bypass, this seems like a lost opportunity to bring the bass response of this stage up. So we may, if we're still lacking some bass after doing these changes, we will definitely look at this 0.1 capacitor right here. Moving through a little further, we get into our phase inversion, and everything's fairly standard. 0.01 there. This is a pretty small cap right here. This coupling cap coming out of here. So, you know, again, this cap are on my radar. If these first changes, which I'm suspecting, we're going to be able to change this and get it pretty close to where we want to be. And then if we're still lacking just that little smidgen of bass that would make a Telecaster really shine, we're going to come over here and mess with this 0.1 and this 0.005. Looking a little further toward the output, again we have 6 AQ5s. We have a 20 microfarad bypass on that, and it is cathode biased, this amplifier. 8 ohm speaker, and let's see, this is the power section over in here. We're going to remove this death cap and put a 3-prong cord in, being sure once again to make sure that the light stays across the line. If you guys saw one of my previous videos, you'll see my foibles with that little light, and this is going to be probably one of those, well, it definitely is. It's one of those little neon lights, and those you cannot put in series because they need to be across the line. Let's see, here's another look at where they have the mess up here, and the 12AX7 listed, so we already know that's incorrect. Pretty decent layout on the chassis. You've got your reverb, driver and uptake tube over here, and this is your driver transformer right beside one another, and then this is the rest of your amplifier going this way. You've got your output transformer near your, so you know everything's laid out well, for sure. Got a components list here, so if you need to replace one of these transformers or something like that, you can find out, you know, at least what the original part number was. So that's good, and they also have voltages listed, so that's nice. It's kind of a shame. It's a nicely laid out schematic if they hadn't made that mistake with the 6EU7. Now the customer was kind of complaining somewhat about the response of the reverb. I don't necessarily see it as a problem. Let's see. The driver is after, in other words, the tie-in for the reverb comes after the tone sucking network. So once this is changed and this is removed, that's actually going to drive more signal through to the reverb stage. So that's going to improve the response of the reverb tremendously as well. He's going to notice a real
tremendous uptick in response of the reverb. You're probably going to get a lot more saturation toward the 2 or 3 on the dial as opposed to starting at 5 or 6 on the dial. So that'll help. And then I'm sure he'll get a lot of saturation even further up to, toward 9 or 10 on the dial. But yeah, that's the schematic. Over here we see the tremolo section. No complaints about the tremolo section on this, so we're going to leave all of that as is. So that's the schematic for the GA-17RVT Scout. Now let's look inside at the guts. Okay, we have the upper back panel of this thing off so we can get a little better look at least our tubes and our transformers. This first transformer over here, this is going to be the reverb driver transformer. We have a model number of E-6400 on that. Right below that we'll see 166 is our manufacturer code, followed by 4 for 1964, 19 for the 19th week. Everything back here continues as far as the cleanliness goes. Let's check out at least this first tube and see if that's a 12AX7 or a 6EU7. Right off the bat, I can see it's labeled Raytheon. Let's check it out. Alright, let's see. And it's labeled Gibson. Look at that. Hang on, let me get a better grip on it. See, I always try to hold tubes like this, just like you would hold a coin, like a silver coin or something, collectible coins. You don't want to touch them and rub off all the stuff. But we do see that it's a 12AX7 made in USA for Gibson. Interesting tube by Raytheon. And that has a 62, so that's a 1962 29th week day code. So, okay. The 12AX7 at least was correct, so that when you look at the tube chart, if nothing else, maybe you wouldn't make the mistake of putting in a 6EU7 in this spot. If you did, I don't think it would be disastrous. I've had other customers bring me Gibson amps that were, and I'll link a video up here actually where you can see another example of a Gibson amp that had that mislabeled, and somebody had put in the wrong tube as a result, and I mean the amp was acting up and it wasn't right, but it didn't blow anything up or do anything disastrous. So but that's one of the things you want to really pay attention to with Gibson amps, because they changed their schematics so much. Sometimes you don't know what's supposed to be in here. So let's look at this second stage. This is an RCA 6EU7. These are nice tubes. And these are the kinds of tubes, guys. I mean, if you take your amps to a technician and they say, oh, you need all new tubes, be somewhat skeptical at first. I mean, it may be the case that you do need all new tubes, but at the same time, if you have these old RCAs in there, it's quite possible that your old RCAs are not the problem, because they were manufactured very well. They had extremely good quality control at RCA at this time. So if you have RCAs in your amp, that's a good thing. You want to try to keep those if they're good. Let's see, we got another RCA and a series of RCAs. I think all these are RCA. Let's see, this one is an RCA. And these are, I'm sure, original. This is what you would have seen in Gibsons of the time. I'm actually more surprised by the V1 tube. That 12AX7 is a surprise to me, seeing the Gibson logo on there, because you don't see that very much, or at least I haven't. And we'll spray out all of these tube sockets and everything too. We'll come back in here and spray them and clean it all out just to be thorough. These 6AQ5s, these are also RCAs. I'm not going to pull those. This TF-18-10, that is the model number. I'm sorry we're upside down here, but bear with me. 549 is the manufacturer code, 1964 17th week, so that's an original transformer for sure. Now this, I said it might not be an original 6CA4
rectifier tube, but I might have to reconsider that, because look at the amount of dust that's on it in the appropriate direction. That's in the upward direction, so that's been in here quite a long time. And you know, I don't know, I haven't seen that I recall any Amperex in any other Gibson amps. Maybe they just had to place an emergency order. So, you know, sometimes the regular go-to people, RCA, you know, may have been out of this tube. They may have been back ordered or something at the time Gibson tried to place a big order. So instead of waiting, they just went with something else. Or it could have been that Amperex just had a deal going. They imported a bunch of tubes and they had a deal. See that 4 right there, 418? That's probably 1964, 18th week, and that jives with everything else. So I'd say this is going to be an original tube for this amplifier. So I'll have to double back, I think, on that opinion, that it wasn't an original rectifier tube. These are the kinds of little things that you get into when you, sorry for the bad camera work, that you get into when you actually pull components and you start really investigating an amp. TP, let's see, get a more light. TP-8A-P. That's our big power transformer. We can see 996 is our manufacturer code. 1964, the 20th week. So the 20th week of 1964. This seems to be our latest code that we've found so far. And again, just another look at the cab and how clean it is. I mean, this is, spick and span. This is way cleaner than you would expect a 1964 amp of this type to be. But let's go ahead and get the chassis out. We're going to have to disconnect the speaker. Unfortunately, they didn't give us really enough lead to get the chassis out and get a good look at it and leave it hooked up. So we're going to have to disconnect the speaker, and if we do any testing, we'll connect some gator clips. One more thing you don't really see on a lot of amps of Gibson from the later 60s period is actual plywood on the back door. This back door, real good shape too. I mean, look how clean this thing is. Everything is just very neat, very tidy. Got a couple staples here in the corners. Those were all original. I mean, this thing is just super tidy, and it's real plywood, so that's a plus. You don't get that with the later Gibsons. And another thing on these, before you just go yanking a chassis out of a Gibson amp of this vintage, you want to make sure, this one's already broken when I got it, and this would have been attached. This is a little retainer. You know, again, it's already broken, and it would have been attached, I think, somewhere up here on the chassis, but I'm not really 100% sure. But again, it is already cracked. It's still holding the wires together, but this one down here, there's another retainer down here on the speaker, and really all you need to do with those is just get something that I don't even have at the moment, apparently. A screwdriver. You can get a screwdriver, or you can get a pair of needle nose pliers, something like that, and just gently, you know, lift up on that to kind of bend it enough to get your wires out of there. Just something like that, so that, you know, they're not hanging on. Because if you go and try to yank the chassis out, you'll end up either breaking your ends off or something. You'll mess something up. So you got to be careful with that. Okay, and as with all Gibson amps of this era, there's a panel that covers the bottom of the chassis. This is pretty nice because it helps to shield everything and just keep out noise. You won't get any kind of RF interference or anything like that. 1/4 inch nut driver. I think these are just finger tight. Yeah, these are just finger tight. Now I can tell this panel has been off before because you see this little bit of black stripping here. This is supposed to go up under the front lip. There's another piece of back stripping on the other side, on the back edge, and it's supposed to go on top of the lip. So unless it's in this configuration where the front edge is underneath and the back edge is on top, someone's been in it before, and you can tell that for sure. And that kind of goes with with what the owner told me, that someone has been in here before recapping this thing. We'll see. Yep, sure enough, there's some new caps here. Let's get a pointer so we can point some things out. Let's make sure you can see also. I don't know if you guys can see or not, but let's zoom in, and you can see here. Here's the death cap still in place. Here is one of the the power caps. Here's another power cap coming over here, and it's kind of floating a bit, but that's probably okay. There are there's a couple more actually down here. There's a 33, and that one, I don't know, that's floating a bit more than I'm kind of comfortable with. I don't see an empty terminal I could really use. That's probably why they did it like that. We'll see if there's any way I can clean that up so that one's not floating and this one's not floating too, but I don't know. They may be okay. They've been in here for a while, I'm sure, anyway. Again, here's the other one. Right in here, tucked in, and we'll get a little closer look at it. Yeah, right in here, this is our infamous Sprague 102 C84 component. These are the components that if you have a Gibson amp, I suggest yanking these out. If you want to drop them in a baggie and send them along when you sell your amp, and you could say, hey, all the original components are there if you ever want to put it back, that's cool, but these really need to come out of here. They were shaping the tone in such a way that it just it kind of kills the low end, and it makes it impossible for you to use really any Fender guitars that I've had an experience with on these Gibson amps. So we're going to come in here, yank this component. We're going to look at the also at the coupling capacitor that's coming into it, which I think is this little guy. Okay, when you're wiring in a new 3-prong power cord, there are a couple ways you can do it, and it will work, but I don't know how ideal it is to follow where the old wires are coming in. You can see here's one side of the old 2-prong, and it comes over to the inside of the fuse, comes through here. Of course, our light is connected. That's our neon light. It's connected there in parallel, but it also goes to one side of the transformer, comes out of the transformer, comes over to here, and here's the other side of the light in parallel across the line. Then it goes through the switch, and here is the other end of our line through the switch. Now I could wire the new 3-prong cord and just, basically flip a coin or take my pick, or I could put the hot to the switch first so that everything gets turned off whenever you hit the switch, and it would probably be okay. I've done that on a lot of former ones, but I think what I'm going to do here, just so I don't get yelled at by some of the people in the amp community, the UL recommendations I think recommend that you come in with the hot through the fuse first, out of the fuse on the other side, then go through a switch, then through the transformer, and then back out. So I think that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll tie our this in, our light in, across the line there. But okay, our tone sucking network is gone, and in its place we have a 0.047 coupling capacitor. We also went ahead and changed the 0.1 bypass cap on the next stage with a 10 microfarad bypass cap. That's going to beef up the bass going through that stage. So here are the components that we've removed. We removed the Sprague all-in-one tone sucking network, removed the depth capacitor, we removed the the coupling capacitor right before the Sprague, and we changed this 0.1 microfarad bypass cap to a 10 microfarad bypass cap. If you're ever messing with these Spragues, a good way to understand how they're hooked up is the middle leg, the number 2 leg, is basically this connection to ground, so it'll always go to ground. the number 1 or the number 3, it doesn't really matter which, will be on either end, because as you can see there's a 220 and a 220 between these points, between the 2 and the, or 1 and the 2 and the 2 and the 3. And there's also a 500 picofarad going from 1 over to 3. So it doesn't matter which way 3 is or 1, as long as you get 2 to ground. The other 2 will be one of these 2 ends. One thing I did go ahead and do while I'm in here, these 3-prong cords are a lot heavier, so I went ahead and added a retainer. That's going to keep somebody from tripping over the cord and yanking everything out and causing a problem. Also, there were already 4 holes. There were already 2 different holes for each one of these screws. The last guy, I think, who was in here didn't put them back in the correct hole. So what I've done is put it in the hole that left a little gap at the top, and that's going to allow more heat dissipation from the tubes. Okay, we're all finished up with this thing, and we're ready to give it a listen. And we're going to start out with the Telecaster, which is what the customer wants to ultimately be able to use. We'll start it with about on 5. That's in the bridge position, so listen to the punch. Okay, so that's about halfway up. Let's go up to about 8 or so. I'm sure you can already tell it's a lot hotter.
Telecaster. Now, just for good measure, let's try it with the SG as well. About on 5. Let's go up to about 8. Really nice and crunchy, really ballsy without being flubby, and I think that holds true with both types of guitar, with the Gibson and the Fender now. So I think the modifications that we've done are successful. Just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and check the reverb and see if, again, I think the reverb is going to probably be a little more pronounced now. We're on 2 right there, and it's definitely more pronounced, I can already tell. That is a 1964 Gibson Scout model GA17RVT. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to all of my videos down here below so that you can see ones like this in the future, and y'all take care.